This is a message for all the scam artists and cult leader fanboys who like to come on channels and strike them, even though it's legitimate commentary about their favorite scam artist in the community. They like to say it's for the betterment of black people, but most of it's basically for the betterment of slow people. And we don't want to benefit slow. We want them to do better, be smarter, and a little bit quicker with their brains, what little left they have of them. Well, anyway, for all the people who don't know how YouTube works, this message is for you. We want copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowances is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news, reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. That's right. So, when we're talking about the scam artists, you know, how they steal from the community, lie, self-expose.
You really don't understand. You will never change this system. You have to make your own. And that, brother, I have to be very, very critical of, because again, I'm 31 and how the hell do I see this? And you work for them and you have never questioned the history of Dr. Fauci. You have never questioned all of his suggestions over the years. Do you know his track record? Do you know all the things that this man has suggested that have not worked? Not recently. I'm talking about all the way back to the 1980s and 90s when he became one of the individuals who became America's doctor. You need to research the people who you work for and with so that you know that you may be a party to the destruction of your people unwittingly, unknowingly, unintentionally. And too many black folks help to destroy.
Interesting you say that, Brother Rizza. But what about the organization that you represent? What is its impact on the black community? What are you representing unknowingly? Let's talk about it.
With great regret. There's no organization in this country that could do more for the struggling black man than the Black Muslim movement if it wanted to. But it has gotten into the possession of a man who's become senile in his old age and perhaps doesn't realize it. And then he has surrounded himself by his children who are now in power and want nothing but luxury and security and comfort and will do anything to safeguard their own interests. So I feel responsible for having played a major role in developing a criminal organization. It was not a criminal organization at the outstart. It was an organization that had the power, the spiritual power, to reform the criminal. And this is what you have to understand. As long as that strong spiritual power was in the movement, it gave the moral strength to the believer that would enable him to rise above all his negative tendencies. I know, because I went into the movement with more negative tendencies for the betterment of the community by any means necessary. And since tonight we had to get into this old nasty negative subject. I mentioned the conspiracy between the Muslims and the right wing in this country. I know for a fact that there is a conspiracy between the Muslims and the Lincoln Rockwell Nazi and also the Ku Klux Klan. There is a conspiracy.
Describe this conspiracy.
Well, the Ku Klux Klan made a deal, or were trying to make a deal with Elijah Muhammad in 1960 in the home of Jeremiah X, the minister in Atlanta at that time, who at present is the minister in Philadelphia. They were trying to make a deal with him to make available to Elijah Muhammad a county, a size tract of land in Georgia or South Carolina, where Elijah Muhammad could then induce Negroes to migrate and make it appear that his program of a segregated state or separated state was feasible. And to what extent these negotiations finally developed, I do not know, because I was not involved in them beyond the period of December 1960. But I do know that after that, Jeremiah, who was the minister throughout the South, could roam the entire South and the Klan not bother him in any way, shape, or form, nor would they bother any of the black Muslims from then on, nor would the black Muslims bother.
So here's my question, right? What's the likelihood that Minister Farrakhan completely took over the work of Elijah Muhammad, considering that he also, back in the 90s, so the 80s, had neo-Nazis a part of Nation of Islam activities, as well as he collected money from this same Rockwell, I think the 80s. And with that said, how do we know that, this whole position about the vaccines comes from Mr. Farrakhan? How do we know that it doesn't come from his connections with white supremacy? But now, I know it's hard for some people to make the connections, but let's think about it. If there's a bunch of black people who have decided that because of the word from Minister Farrakhan, they aren't going to take the vaccine. Now, I know it's hard. At what point does this start affecting people's livelihoods? How many black people have already been impacted negatively because they refuse to take the vaccine? How many children? What's the long-term effects of having COVID without any treatment? What's the position on other diseases like AIDS? Well, it doesn't seem like the black community is doing well there. Cancer? Monkeypox? It just doesn't seem like we're making good medical choices, but how could we when our spiritual leaders are telling us to not trust the doctors, even the black ones?